So in this video, we're going to be looking at the Bento areas stack. Now, the Bento areas stack can build very similar style grids, pretty much the exact grids that you can build with the Bento stack. You can build with Bento areas, but the two stacks take a very, very different approach. In some ways, Bento areas is simpler, and in some ways, it's also a little bit more advanced. So let's jump in and kind of show you why it is both more simple and complex right now. So Bento areas allows us to define content areas by a name. Okay. So here inside the areas, let's ignore these area rules for right now, and let's show you how we can actually build out our content. So what we're going to do is I'm going to build just a generic run-of-the-mill layout for a web page. I'm not going to use this. You can use this to build out smaller layouts within your web page, but I'm going to build this to be the overall layout for our web page. So in here, I have defined 4 content areas. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set this area name to be header. And for edit mode, so that we can use our grid designer, we're going to assign this to be area number 1. Okay, so now we have area number 1, and it says that we have header right there. Okay, and let's go ahead and add in a new area, and we're going to make this be main, and that's going to be number 2. And then we're going to add one more, and this is going to be side for our sidebar, and that's going to be content number 3. And we're going to add one more, and that's going to be footer, and we're going to make that item number 4. So now that we kind of have that situated, let's go ahead and look at what we can do here. So just like other Bento stacks, we have our preview grids. So we can see our extra small is by default. Then we have small, medium, and large. And see how this morphs and completely changes based off small. We have our header, then our main content. Our sidebar is below our main content. And then we have our footer, right? And then once we jump up to medium, kind of is a more traditional layout where we have our header. We have a little bit of a gutter on the left and the right. We have our main content. We have a sidebar. And then below all of that, we have a footer that goes full width. And that's the same on large. Now, how do we define this grid? Because here we're not, the other Bento stacks, we're kind of building out a grid and then we're sizing them by it's going to be 2 columns wide and 3 rows tall, right? You're defining the sizes of those particular items. But here, we're not. We're just defining labels. And in order to understand what those are, we need to look at these area definitions. Okay, so here is the area definition that is by default on the extra small breakpoint. And let's analyze this. As you see, you'll probably notice that we have our labels. These are the same labels that we created when we created our areas. We have header, main, side, and footer. Now, essentially what we're doing is we are building out a grid with words. Now, if we look at this, I have 4 rows of content. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of content. Now, within those 4 rows, I have 3 columns. Here in the first row, I have header is going to take up all 3 columns. In the second row of content, I actually just have my main, and dot is a special thing where it's basically like a gutter. It's just empty space. We don't have any content there at all. And if you remember, that's the little padding or gutter that we have from this side of our browser windows. So here we have a little bit of empty space, and then we have main, our main content area, and then we have a little bit of empty space. Same thing in our sidebar, but then in the footer, we don't want to have empty, in our footer and our header, we do not want empty space. We want the header and the footer to go full width the browser window with no empty space at all. So that footer is going to take up the empty space, the main content area of the footer, as well as that empty space. Now, another thing that is very important, is that each row needs to have double quotes in here. This is a very particular, very syntax specific solution that once you get your head around it, it makes things very powerful and easy to use. But this syntax is very strict. Now, if we looked at when we morphed up into medium and large devices, our layout changed a little bit. And let's go ahead and do that. Essentially what happened is we have main and side were on the same row. So here we had, we didn't have this row at all. So in our medium and large devices, we actually are going to have 4 columns and 3 rows of content. Now here we have, again, our gutter, kind of our padding between the edge of the browser and our content. And then we have a sidebar, and then we have that padding again. Now up here though, header is only taking up 3. So basically what we're going to have to do is, because we want the header and the footer to be full width, we're going to have to modify that so that those have 4 as well. Now we see here, if you want to take an area and expand it across multiple columns, you just simply repeat that header, in this case a header, over multiple columns. And basically it's saying this header is going to take up 4 columns. But how do we make something expand multiple rows? So let's say, for example, I wanted to have a second content area. So I can have gutter on the side. And let's say we want to have extra here. So this is our extra. And essentially now, since side is in 2 rows and it's also matched up to the same column, okay? So this side and this side are in column 3. And because I put them spanning across 2 different rows, that side will expand across 2 rows. Now, another thing that could help is you can actually add in as many spaces as you want in here. So if you wanted to kind of, visually see this so that they're spaced out into their various actual columns, you can do that. So here we can see, here's column 1, here's column 2, here's column 3, and then here again, the sidebar is spanning across 2 different rows, and then here's our column 4. Let's play around with these directly inside edit mode, and we can kind of see how things play out. So as you see here inside extra small mode, I can go ahead and let's just go ahead and start overwriting what we have here. So I have my sidebar, and I'm going to cut that, and I'm going to put it before our main. Now, in order to add a return here, you just do Option and the return key, and that will make it multiple lines. And what you'll notice here is our layout has shifted. Inside of our grid designer, it now shows us that we have our header, our sidebar, then our main content, and then our footer. Now, let me show you what happens if I go ahead and turn off these little dots in the sidebar and in the main. Okay. Well, it kind of breaks things because we now no longer have 3 columns inside of our row. So that means something is wrong with our syntax here. So we're going to have to modify that, right? But we can do side. So if we look now, what I did is I added side, and so now our main content and our sidebar are going to start way at the edge of our browser. Now they're at the edge of the browser because I'm using a blank theme, and this Bento's area stack is not inside of a container that doesn't have any sort of gutter, right? But essentially, this will start at the edge of the layout. In this example here, it's going to be the edge of the browser, but it could be the edge of your layout if you're using this within other stacks on your page or within a traditional theme. Now, what determines the size of our layouts? What determines the size of these columns? If you look above, so here we are on the large layout, and we see that our header goes full width, and then our main content, basically our second row of content, which has our main content and sidebar, It doesn't go full width. It has these little gutters, okay? And then the footer goes full width as well. So what controls the sizes of that? And that has to do with the large columns or the column setting. So we have large, extra small, small, medium, and large columns. And if you notice, has a set of measurements in here, okay? And for large, we have 4 columns. So I have 4 measurements. Let's look at these. So here is our area's grid definition, okay? If you notice here, we have 4 columns. And down here, I have 4 measurements. Now, these are all standard CSS measurements, and we'll talk about them. But you can use more than just what is here. Here I have rem. You're probably familiar with rem. One rem is approximately 16 pixels. If you're more familiar with pixels, you can change this to be 16px. So basically, column number 1 is 16 pixels. Column number 2 is 3fr. Column number 3 is 1fr. We'll get back to that unit. And then 1 rem. Let's go ahead and change that to 16 pixels as well. So it's a super familiar unit. Now, the FR unit is relatively new, and it might be completely new to you. What does that mean? So it is a fractional unit. So essentially what this is saying is column 2 needs to be 3 times larger than column 3. So basically, if we divvied up these 2 columns, this one is going to be 3 times larger than this one. In other respects, you could say this is 75% and this is 25%. The same thing, right? This will work just the same. That fractional, the FR units are just something kind of relatively new, and they work within CSS Grid. So that's fractional units. You can use any CSS unit you want here. You can use pixels, you can use percentages, you can use Vmax, whatever CSS unit you are aware of, you can most likely use it here. Okay. Now I left this very wide open so that you can do what you want as a power user. The only caveat is you have to make sure that you define the number of units that are equal to the number of columns that you defined. So hopefully now that we've seen this, we can kind of understand how this is working now. So here in column 1 of header, this is 16 pixels wide. This one is 75%. This one is 25%. And this last column is 16 pixels. In our second row of content, this dot, it doesn't have anything. There's no content assigned to it, but it is 16 pixels wide. Then we have our main content, which is 75%, our sidebar, which is 25%. And then we have, again, another empty column that is going to be 16 pixels wide. This is why we have little gutters on the side. And then our footer behaves exactly like header. So all 4 of these columns map to these sizes. So what we've built here is essentially this demo that we have on the Bento product page. At the top, we have our header. And again, maybe you're going to have inside that header stack, the area, you're going to have an impact stack or some sort of large image banner that has whatever you want. And then in your main content area, this is where you're going to put your actual main content. Maybe it's a blog or a product page or whatever, right? And then your sidebar, that could be maybe a partial that contains all kinds of information and links and whatnot, right? And then you have your footer, which is, again, probably going to be another partial that has, all your links to various things on your website and your contact us and other things, your copyright and all that jazz goes down in your footer, right? So again, this is just, Bento here is a web page layout tool or a layout tool in general that you can then put whatever stacks that you want inside of it.